Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you just fine.
Okay. Hi, everyone. This is Ali Kia. I'm a member and one of the co-founder of International Marxist Humanist Organization, IMHO. I have the honor to chair this memorial for Kambiz Rafie, political name Ali Kiani, and Kia Saidi. The nation is named both. We would like to start with some international music in memory of Kambiz. Please mute your speaker. Before we start, I would like to mention that we are friends and comrades from different countries. Some of us are not fluent with English language. So therefore, we are going to have this meeting in both, especially Farsi, both English and the short version of our main two speakers in the Farsi. And at the end, when the comment from the participant comes out, we can have, if somebody would like to speak Farsi, we can translate. I would like to start my presentation, start up with the memory of Ali Kiani now. Then I have a short translation of that to Farsi. On September 16, 2021, our comrade and revolutionary Kambiz Rafie passed away. Ali Kiani was a very active member of International Marxist Humanist, IMHO, during the past 5 years, including as a member of our editing committee for both English and Persian language articles. Kambiz, or Ali Kiani, came to US from Iran to study when he was 18 years old. He joined the Iranian Student Confederation, one of the largest Iranian student organizations in USA. Ali became an active member of the organization in order to struggle against the Shah's regime in Iran. He was working for a living and studying while very involved as a political activist. He studied physics and got his bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. He returned Iran before the 1979 revolution and became a member of Razmandigan organization. They called them Organization of Working Class Freedom Fighters to fight against the Shah's regime and defend the workers' movement. At that time, Razmandigan was a left-wing Marxist organization. In 1979, a mass revolution involving tens of millions of people overthrew the regime, and an uprising in which Ali Kiani participated. As the regime began to fall, revolutionary crowds broke into military and police installations in cities in order to seize arms and vanquish the regime. Kambiz participated in these street battles, as well as in the workers' council that were emerging in this period. He and his comrades interacted closely with these revolutionary workers, conducting study sessions with them on Marx. But not after the Shah's overthrow, Khomeini's counter-revolutionary theocratic regime began to establish itself in this place. This led to many pressure on workers' council as Islamic reactionaries allied to Khomeini's move to take them home. All this led to a lot of turmoil among Iranian left organizations, including within the Razmandigan organization. Ali stayed with the left wing of the organization, whose members believe Khomeini's regime was reactionary and they need to oppose the Islamic regime. After the Islamic regime started to attack all left organizations, executing some of their opponents, Ali and his comrades realized they need to rethink their past Marxist theories and find out what had gone wrong. And they needed only to apply it to objective war. In fact, Iranian Marxist organization had in the past assumed that the theory was given, and they need to apply it into the objective war. But now Ali realized that it was their theory which they needed to rethink. To understand their situation, they started to read Marx and Lenin with fresh eyes. After betrayal of the Second International in 1914, after betrayal of Second International, Lenin in 1914 began reading Hegel's Science of Logic. Lenin returned to the philosophical foundation of Marxism. Dialectics was through his own reading of Hegel. He realized that Marx's theory of liberation is rooted in Hegel's dialectical theory and his philosophical ideas. Lenin's view changed after the reading, after which he proclaimed that it is impossible to grasp Marx's Capital, especially the first chapter of the Hegel logic. The first chapter that there means commodity and money, which Marx in volume 1 of Capital is mentioned. And Lenin mentioned, if you have not truly studied, understood, and hold Hegel's logic, you are not going to grasp Marx's ideas, especially in the first chapter. Ali paid more attention to Lenin's classical notebook, and Lenin in 1914 changed view and his understanding of Marxism. In this sense, Ali and his Iranian comrade rediscovered in the midst of revolution and counter-revolution the revolutionary dialectic of Lenin on eve of Russian Revolution of 1917. Later, to bring him in contact with, few years actually later, contact with Marxist humanism in the US. as someone who had encountered on the completely independent and very high level some of the same dialectical principles drawn from Lenin that were at the core of Marxism, humanism. During this same time, as Islamic regimes, police, and informants closed in the organization asked Ali to leave, closed in, the organization asked Ali to leave the country for his protection. Ali left Iran and went to Turkey. During the few months that Ali was there, he established the safe house for Iranian political activists who had escaped from Iran, running for their life as the Islamic secret police were searching for them. A few months later, Ali applied to political asylum from the US government. First, he had to go to Italy, and after a few months, he came to the United States. He went to San Francisco and then settled in Los Angeles. It didn't take much time for Ali to get into contact with the Iranian Marxist humanists and their organization, IMHO. He also came into contact with US Marxist humanist activists, Kurdish in Los Angeles, in order to gain better understanding of Marxism. As Ali came to see it, Marxist humanism has answered to his question about the Iranian Revolution failure, not only what happened and why, but also concerning what is to be done today. Anjuman Azadi had a bulletin called Sukhan Azadi, Talk to Freedom. I have different version of them. Several bulletins we had during the 1993 and 1994. During this period, he wrote several articles of Marx political economy, materialist dialectics, Marx humanistic view, philosophy and organization. He also translated in the Persian one of the Raya Dunayevskaya's key essay on Lenin and Hegel, the shock of recognition and philosophic ambivalence of the Lenin. 6 years ago, at the beginning of the Trump presidency, he wrote a comment from him. Those who optimistically didn't take Trump's fascism, we are talking about 6-7 years ago, not now, 6 years ago. Those who optimistically did not take Trump's fascist anti-democratic comment during his election campaign still do not see his threat to humanity and environment today and not believe in seriousness of the matter that we are at the epic change that this election, he already changed this country to a path of becoming a racist, sexist, anti-gender equality society, and this is just a beginning. Ali also worked as an engineer in the US, but eventually lost his job due to automation. He often commented to this with a wry sense of humor as an example of what capitalism doing everywhere and every day. After the IMHO started its activity in US, Britain and few others, Ali joined our Los Angeles chapter. He has been a very active member since 2015, serving on IMHO Journal's editing committee for all that period, right up until the end. Ali spoke at our public meeting in LA on a regular basis. on topics like the recent uprising inside Iran, the Syrian revolution, Palestinian, and struggle of the Kurdish people for national liberation. He was a revolutionary internationalist in the deepest sense of the term. He did not limit his activity or his theorizing to Iran and Middle East. He also spoke out and wrote articles about the issue like the Great Recession, Brexit, Trump war, threats against North Korea, democracy and socialism, and in the writing of the young Marx. In addition, he participated in all study groups, whether those based in LA or remotely in Santa Barbara and Europe. During the last 5 years, Ali didn't stop his theoretical and practical activities, even though he had a serious heart, blood, diabetes, and stomach problem that forced him to go to the hospital for treatment many times. Just before his death, even though he had a hard time walking even with the cane, Ali participated in demonstrations against political repression in Iran. Ali dedicated his life not only to the movement in Iran, but also to revolutionary movement in the US and international. He was extremely humble while at the same time having a lot to say. He was a true human being, a revolutionary with love for freedom and for all struggles for liberation. He will be missed. Our deepest condolences to his family, his friends, and his comrades. Okay, I would like to say a very short version of what I mentioned to Farsi for those friends and comrades which they might doesn't have an English language. رفیق کامبیز رفیعی که اسم سیاسی او علی کیانی بود، همچنین کیا سعیدی بود، در شهریور امسال درگذشت. کامبیز یکی از اعضای فعال سازمان هومانیستا بود و در 5 سال گذشته یکی از ویراستارهای سازمان چه به زبان انگلیسی و چه زبان فارسی. در 18 سالگی به آمریکا برای تحصیل اومد و در رشته فیزیک تحصیل کرد و یکی از اعضای فعال کنفدراسیون جهانی دانشجویان. موقعی که لیسانس خودش رو میگیره در رشته مهندسی مکانیک قبل از انقلاب ایران برمیگرده. در اونجا بود که به سازمان رزمندگان که سازمان چپ مارکسیستی بود میپیوند و در دوران انقلاب در مبارزات خیابانی شرکت میکنه و همچنین با شورای کارگری که در زمان انقلاب وجود بود. موقعی که ضد انقلاب رژیم خمینی کنترل جامعه در دست میگیره، در دوران شورای کارگری رژیم در نفوذ میکنه و بعد از دستگیری مخالف چپ بعد از اون شروع میشه. همین باعث میشه که در درون سازمان‌های سیاسی چپ در با حمایت رژیم ارتکاب انجام میشه و انشعاباتی در درون سازمان‌ها در مخالفت و یا تحمل و یا همکاری با این رژیم صورت میگیره. در نظر داشته زمان چپ ایجاد شد. همین هم باعث شد که در درون رزمندگان هم این حرکت خودش رو نشون میده. کامبیز در جناحی قرار میگیره که معتقد بودن که رژیم ارتجاعیه و میدونستی مبارزه کرد. کامبیز بعد از مدتی به خاطر شناسایی او توسط پلیس سیاسی مجبور میشه که ترکیه فرار میکنه که اتفاقا همون زمان بود که در ترکیه تونست خونه امنی درست کنه برای مبارزه‌های ایرانی که مخالف رژیم ایران بودن و از ایران میشه ترکیه فرار کرد و اونها پناه میدن. کامبیز در همون دوران هم بود که از آمریکا تقاضای پناهندگی میکنه و بعدها بعد از سرگردانی مختلف در شهر ساکن میشه. کامبیز و رفقاش از زمان انقلاب و شکست انقلاب به خودشون برمیگردن و تئوری‌های گذشته خودشون رو به چالش میکشن. خوندن دوباره نظرات مارکس به خصوص لنین مشغول میشن. در واقع لنین بعد از خیانتی که سوسیالیست‌ها در انتی‌نئولیبرالیسم دوم مرتکب میشه، برای فهمیدن و خوندن مارکس به خصوص کتاب علم منطق هگل و دیدگاه فلسفی مارکس برمیگرده. این تغییر فکری در 1914 در نظرات لنین وجود میاد که در واقع در برگردی نظراتش بود در انقلاب 1917. در اون زمان بود که لنین مطرح میکنه که اگه مارکسیست‌ها کتاب علم منطق هگل رو دقیق نخونده باشن و نفهمیده باشن، قادر نیستن که نظرات مارکس به خصوص فصل اول کتاب سرمایه که بهش کارآمد میگن رو بفهمن. یادتون باشه آلتوزر کسی بود که فصل اول کتاب مارکس سفر اولش و جلد اولش رو گفتش که نخون. کامبیز و همراهانش با خوندن نظرات لنین به خصوص تغییر نظراتش در 1914 یک افق تازه‌ای براشون باز میشه. همین باعث میشه که کامبیز در لس آنجلس با مارکسیست‌های ایرانی آشنا میشه و همچنین با نظرات رای دونایevskaya بنیانگذار مارکسیسم آشنا میشه. این جنبندی که انقلاب ایران شکست خورد به خاطر که انقلابیون ایران فلسفه انقلاب نداشتن، یعنی روشن نبودن که بعد از انقلاب چه کار باید بکنن. کامبیز جواب رو در مارکسیسم هومانیست‌های ایرانی و در 1990 جواب رو در تئوری‌های مارکسیسم پیدا می‌کنه و در اون دهه 1990 بود که مارکسیسم نشر میدن به نام سخن آزاد که کامبیز یکی از نویسندگان اصلی بود. خود من بودم یکی از توصیه اصلی و بود با وجود آمدن سازمان بین‌المللی مارکسیسم هومانیست‌ها و IMHO کامبیز میدونن یکی از اعضای فعال اون میشه و از مبارزات خودش چه در رابطه با مبارزات بین‌المللی در آمریکا و چه در رابطه با مبارزات در ایران متاخرش خیلی از رفقای ایرانی مارکسیست از جمله خود من در کنارش بود و رفیق علی کیانی در مبارزات آمریکا و همچنین در رابطه با مبارزات ایران هم شرکت می‌کرد. در واقع فرد خیلی مهربانی بود، محبت و روح شادی داشت و نه فقط در زمینه تئوریک و عمل سیاسی بلکه در اخلاق و رفتار انسانی نمونه. رفقایی که در سابق با حداقل با ما بودن در آشنا بودن در 1990 یا بیاد دارن و با وجود آگاهی عمیق، آگاهی سیاسی و اجتماعی بچه بسیار خاکی بود. من در کامبیز رابطه‌ای که باید بگیم بین سیاست و عشق مبارزه آزادی‌خواهانه و خصوصیت اخلاقی اینا رو واقعا جداگانه می‌دونم و از کامبیز خیلی چیزا یاد گرفتم و واقعا نبوده رو خود من و خود سازمان احساس کنم. از ته قلب به خانواده، رفقا و دوستان کامبیز رفیعی تسلیم می‌گم. Okay. Our next speaker is Hamid Wahed. He is a member of organization and I think he has something to share. Hamid, please start.
All right, let's first, I want to make sure everybody can hear me. Thumbs up. All right, okay.
Yeah.
Great. Hello, everybody. My name is Hamid, and today I want to talk about my friend Ali Kiani. I know him, or I better say I knew him since the early 90s. And here, first, I would like to thank IMHO, International Marxist Humanist Organization, and ORWI, Raya Dunayevskaya, who have arranged this memorial for our comrade Ali Kiani, or as he was known by his family, Kambiz Rafie. I really miss Ali since we were talking to each other at least twice a week. Anytime I needed to get better understanding of a complex political situation, Ali was always ready to talk and share his ideas. I never felt he was tired or bored of talking, nor did he want to hang up the phone. Sometimes when you're on the phone talking with somebody, you have the feeling the other party is at the same time busy with something else, either watching the highlights of some sport events like NBA or NFL, or watching Facebook or fluctuation of stock market. Ali was not like that. He was 100% with you and ready and open to talk. Now he's gone, and I really miss him. In spite of many medical issues, he always kept his spirit high and always had a smile on his face. In the last 3 years of his life, which he could hardly walk, he was still attending demonstrations and keeping his balance with the help of a cane. At the same time, he was holding a banner, as you see behind Ali Reza's picture. From solidarity with Black Lives Matter movement, anti-imperialist rallies, or issues concerning the violation of human rights in Iran, Ali was always ready. The last demonstration he attended was held in front of a hotel where Islamic Republic regime arranged to have a ballot box for the presidential election, a fake presidential election where the criminal Ayatollah Raisi came out as the victor. In one of his last writings, Ali wrote about that election, quoting, "But once more, the Marxist analysis proved its credibility here in Iran about reformists. The state power has full control over armed forces, police, and repressive forces like Basij, prisons and courts, and secret and information services and agencies. As long as the ruling class has control over these apparatus, the political situation has stayed sane." He continues later in this article, quoting, "But the majority of Iranian people are so poor, who have nothing to lose except their shackles. When people reach this degree of poverty and misery, they will become very dangerous for the ruling class. Opposing the government will become part of their daily life." And at the end, he wrote, "We join the majority of Iranian people and boycott this fake election." Like so many other political activists who experienced the political activities under dictatorship and fascism, Ali was using different nicknames. Ali Kiani was one of those names, which he used for his writings and translations. But since Ali is a very common name among Iranian communities, and we have so many of them here, Iranian activists refer to him as Ali Zari, and Zari was his ex-wife, who they got married in Iran and were both political activists and members of Razmandagan organizations. And together, according to the organization order, left Iran and went to Turkey. During their stay in Turkey, they helped Iranian expatriates who, like them, were looking for political asylum. Ali could speak English since he studied in the United States before the revolution and even graduated from University of Wisconsin, Parkside in mechanical engineering. And after graduation, went back to Iran. But because of his activities Within the Confederation of Iranian Students in the United States, he was questioned and interrogated by the time of the entry by Shah Secret Police Sabak, and was forced to do military service as a private. Usually the college graduate after graduation had to serve in the military as a lieutenant, but the Shah's regime, in order to punish political activists, forced them to serve as a private. The life experience in the military base among other privates who were children of poor farmers and workers gave Ali a first-hand experience of culture and behavior of these sections of Iranian society. So for Ali, the punishment became an award. Razmandagan organization, which Ali Kiani and Zari were both members of, was formed a few years before 1979 revolution. They were among third spectrum of Iranian socialist groups and organizations. I remember after 1979 revolution that one of the Savak interrogators named Tehrani, after his arrest in TV interview, explained how he and other Savak members poisoned and killed 3 members of this organization. These organizations in the third spectrum of socialist movement in Iran were criticizing the guerrilla warfare of Fadaiyan and also criticizing the reformist policy of Tudeh party, which was a pro-Soviet. But they were Stalinists. They were Stalinists in philosophy, politics, and organization. In philosophical approach, as Stalin formulated, philosophy of Communist Party is dialectical materialism. And George Politzer's handbook, The Elementary of Principle of Philosophy, and Maurice Comfort's Dialectical Materialism were among the books used to educate the members of these organizations. All these Stalinist groups, in spite of their differences, ignored the guideline formulated by Marx in the criticism of Gotha program for transition between capitalism and socialism and transitional states. For a Stalinist, Communist Party overthrow the bourgeoisie and establish socialism, and the state is dictatorship of proletariat. Like most Iranian leftists, they were influenced by the literature published by the Marxist-Leninist Academy of Moscow, which was translated to Persian by Tudeh Party from 1941. Tudeh Party was established in 1941 during the Second World War, following the departure of Reza Shah, the father of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Unlike Communist Party of Iran, which was established in 1917, a few months before the October Revolution, and was independent from the Bolshevik Party, Tudeh Party was dependent on the foreign policy of Communist Party of Soviet Union under Stalin. In spite of this, Tudeh Party writers, Tudeh Party writers and translators introduced the workers and students to Marxism, although the Stalinist version. Ali's relatives were members of Tudeh Party, and their house were a place of political debates, especially after 1953 coup and inactivity of Tudeh Party against the coup. So Ali was raised in this atmosphere and was not a stranger to politics. 2 of his cousins were in Shah prison in the 1970s, and one of his cousins, Mina Rafie, was killed by Savak. Although the Tudeh Party followed the Khrushchev guideline at the 20th Congress and criticized Stalin, the literature they left from 1941 to 1956, the time of 20th Congress, had a strong impact on the socialist groups, including but not limited to Razmandagan. Ali was curious about his past political activities and was looking for an answer to find out why the left in Iran was not able to theoretically explain the Iranian Revolution and make a strong relationship with the working class. He wanted to find a good answer as to why, in spite of all the heroism Iranian left did, the fascist Islamic regime easily imprisoned and executed the leftists. He found the answer in breaking away from a Stalinist tradition. I think from here, our comrades in IMHO can better explain how Ali broke away from Stalinist tradition and how he found his answer in IMHO and Dunayevskaya. As Ali mentioned in his last article, social movements are growing in Iran very rapidly. Oil workers, retirees, workers of steel factories, workers of different industries, teachers, and even farmers who generally supported the Islamic regime have gone out to the streets and protest against the Islamic Republic. Iranians are experiencing a revolutionary situation. During this critical time, socialist revolutionaries like Ali Kiani could have helped the revolution find its right path. We don't want the result of all these sacrifices of the brave Iranian people go to waste one more time. At this time, the absence of revolutionaries such as Ali will be felt. Thank you for listening to me.
Hamid, are you done?
I'm done.
Okay. Okay. Our next speaker want to tribute is Mansour. Mansour, are you in the meeting? Okay. If Mansour is not available, Mansour, are you available? Okay. Next one is Tonet. Tonet, one of our member of IMHO, and we would like to talk with regarding her experience. Tonet, pick up this.
Dear comrades and friends, I'm Norwegian, and I met Ali in person about 5 years ago. Before that, I had been in a study group with him, and Ali was a very enthusiastic and talkative person. And he was always very prepared for our meetings, and he was always prepared for some very good discussions. When I met Ali in, can you hear me? I met Ali in person in Los Angeles about 5 years ago. It was my first time in Los Angeles, and I have to say that Ali, together with Kevin, took very good care of me. Ali drove me several times to restaurants, a small restaurant where I could read and work, but we also went several times together, and we had hours of discussions and conversations, and I was extremely inspired of him. He was very competent in theoretical issues, and we had some very important discussions that influenced me very much. I met Ali later on in my new travel to LA, and Ali's health was then started to decline, but still he came and met me with his car at where I stayed and drove me to rallies, and I felt very safe and secure when Ali was with me. I want to point to this because I was very inspired by Ali's embracing heart, and I was also very touched by his embracing heart. I think that Ali was a true revolutionary because he was able to combine his theoretical issues, theoretical positions, his revolutionary positions, and his heart. And he was, and I think that was very important. His theoretical competence, his political spirit, his continuous struggle for the Iranian people and the people in the US, his international commitment and his true humanism makes him a great revolutionary. Thank you, Ali, for your contribution, revolutionary contribution to me, to many different comrades and friends, and to the world. My deepest condolences.
Thank you, Donat, and thank you for correction, because I didn't see the article, I didn't see the date of article, I couldn't find it. So my assumption is about 6 years. Okay, our next speaker is Kevin Anderson. I would like to everybody introduce themselves and they start to speak. So audience, I can introduce you better than yourself. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Ali Reza. There's so many things that could be said about Comrade Ali Kiani, but one thing that I think stands out above all is this is a man who actually participated in a revolution that overthrew a bourgeois government, the Iranian Revolution of 1979, actually on the streets, and also part of the underground or semi-underground struggle, because almost as soon as the revolution happened, the counter-revolution within the revolution reared its head with the Islamist wing of the revolution. And so they had to operate semi-clandestinely. They operated within the workers' councils, within this small Marxist group he was part of. And it was in the midst of all this that they started, one of the ways they were able to break away from Stalinism that Hamid was so eloquently discussing was through a deep study of Lenin's philosophical notebooks, that volume of Lenin's collected works that was always just put as a supplementary volume by the Stalinists, but has been discovered, was one of the roads by which Marxist humanism broke away from Trotskyism in the 1940s. Ali, as has been mentioned, carried on the struggle for over 40 years as a Marxist and as a revolutionary. And as other people have mentioned, but I just want to put a personal touch on that. I last saw him 2 weeks before his death. There he was with his cane. It's that picture that Ali Reza has at a demonstration at the against political repression in Iran with a few other dedicated, mainly Iranian revolutionaries. But I didn't really have a chance to talk to him that day. But my last actual conversation with him was around the same time, because he participated every week in the Zoom study group with mainly UCSB students, but other people in this room like Andres, Ning were part of that, on Marx's 1844 manuscripts, a very deep study of that. And Ali would bring his knowledge over decades into that discussion. I also want to mention that he was part of the LA, he joined the IMHO, he'd been a Marxist humanist, and then he joined the LA chapter of the International Marxist Humanist Organization about 10 years ago. And despite, as with these demonstrations, he's also the one who always showed up for literature tables when nobody else would volunteer. He would show up. I was with him at a big Bernie Sanders rally. We were standing there with the Marxist Humanist literature table. I think it was the 2016 campaign. But he also, when we had the coalition for peace, revolution, and social justice with some other socialist and anarchist tendencies, he again participated consistently in that, but he never separated theory from practice. I think that's something that's so important to mention, that other people have talked about also, not only always showing up to those study groups, but I think the first presentation he gave was at a study group about, God, it must have been 8 or more years ago, on Peter Hudis's book on a Marxist concept of the alternative to capitalism, which was one of Ali's favorite publications of the Marxist humanists. But early on, I mean, we reproduced this. For those who know Persian, this is Ali's translation of one of Raya Dunayevskaya's writings on Lenin's philosophical notebooks and their implications for revolutionary movements of our period. And Ali was a true internationalist. I mean, we sometimes say that, but this is like really, there's a real substance to this. Of course, he was always concerned about the Iranian revolution, and particularly the Iranian working class. But this is someone who is equally passionate about the Kurdish national liberation struggle, but really the whole international struggle for revolution, including here in the United States. While he participated in Persian language study groups and movements, he never kept separate in the Persian-speaking community, but he always participated deeply in struggles and debates in the United States or broadly. He was a very active participant in inside our organization. We had a debate over Brexit 5 or 6 years ago. He was very concerned about the Black Lives Matter movement and all the other burning questions of the revolutionary movement that he both wrote about, spoke about, and participated as both in demonstrations and also inside the Marxist Humanist Organization and the other organizations like Rahi Kagar, to which he devoted his life. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Our next speaker is Rocio Lopez. Rocio, please pick up this.
Hello, I'm Rocio. Can you hear me, everyone? Just checking. Yes. Okay, good. So I met Ali about 5 years ago, and he was so knowledgeable about Marxism. It was incredible. But he, as people have said, he was so humble. He would talk about this, but he wasn't condescending, and he was so just very thoughtful. He treated us, all of us in IMHO, as equals. And this is a very rare thing in life. Especially he listened to, I saw him about twice a month or more often when we had study groups at meetings. And Ali just listened to what other people said. He didn't treat you differently because you were younger, which is very rare thing in our society and US society. Just felt he treated me and everyone that I knew with lots of respect, and he listened to my input. And just as a young woman, that's something that it's like, wow, it's good to see an older man listening as an equal. I will miss him. I found out about his passing while I was on vacation, so I just didn't have a lot of time to process it. What else did I have to say? Yeah, he had so many, he was so articulate. Ali was so articulate. I always wondered, I was like, wow, I wonder how amazing it would be to hear Ali speak in Persian about Marxism. He's already so articulate in English about it. So yeah, he touched my life. I'm really glad I got to know him. And then he was pretty private. He would only say little things about his past, about his, like, I remember for the first time, many years after I got to know him, he mentioned for the first time to me how he got out of Iran. It was an incredible story, but he just didn't, it was interesting that he didn't he wasn't always like, oh, I'm such a great revolutionary. He was, but he didn't make a big deal of it. Yeah, so it was really, I'm glad I got to see him one last time. Unfortunately, because of a pandemic, when we stopped meeting in person, so I stopped seeing him in 2020 in person. I got to see him one last time very briefly in the summer last year, and glad I got to give him a hug. Had no idea that'd be the last time I'd see him, but yeah, he was so humble, so knowledgeable, and he was true internationalist, like people have said, and he treat other human beings. I remember he said that he treated other people with respect, and he said that he noticed that when he was talking about the story of how he got out of Iran, like how he noticed when people would treat you like a human being, like even if you don't have something to offer them necessarily. So anyway, great. We'll miss Ali.
Thank you, Rocio. Our next speaker is Peter Gudes.
Thank you, Ali, and everybody else. I knew Ali for some 30 years. And there was one thing you can always say about Ali, what you can always count on him on. And I've heard him speak dozens and dozens of times and had many private conversations with him besides public discussions. And that was, he was always relating the experiences of the Iranian Revolution in one way or another to contemporary events, to struggles of freedom going elsewhere in the world, to try to bring his experience of what were the accomplishments, but also the shortcomings of the Iranian Revolution to other movements and other struggles so that we can learn from them. And this is a legacy that's invaluable. Because think about that year again, 1979, the Iranian Revolution. It wasn't only the Iranian Revolution, right? 1979 was the year of the Nicaraguan Revolution that overthrew Somoza, the Grenadian Revolution that overthrew the bourgeois regime in Grenada, and the Iranian Revolution, which didn't succeed, which did overthrow the Shah. But unlike in Nicaragua and Grenada, where Marxist tendencies came to power, or at least presumably Marxist tendencies came to power, the New Jewel movement and the Sandinistas, the Marxists were quickly sidelined and suppressed, as the rest of the story of Ali's life demonstrates, when the counter-revolution from within the revolution emerged. But Ali was constantly reminding us of the lessons of that, for both the revolutions that occurred in 1979, but also future revolutions that are bound to occur, and what lessons we have to draw from them. Because there was 2 points that were clear from his own experience in Iran that he often spoke about. One, the tendency of many on the left to say there's really no difference between a semi-fascist or authoritarian state and a bourgeois democracy. They're both, no choice between them. And therefore, we don't have to concern ourselves with democracy in any fundamental sense. This is the heritage, of course, of Stalinism. The other side, which was also in its own way an inheritance of Stalinism, was the notion that before you can reach a socialist revolution, you need a stage of bourgeois democracy led by the petty bourgeoisie, under the control of the petty bourgeoisie, because the working class and peasants would not be ready for this transitional phase to socialism yet. And only when they lay the preconditions for socialism through such a bourgeois democratic regime over some time, could the push for socialism be actualized. Now, as we all know, this proved completely suicidal for the Iranian left that embraced this perspective, because many of them took Khomeini as being that representative of the bourgeois democratic revolution, and thought that this petty bourgeois figure would be the one to tail end, as it were, and then make use of him later as a pathway to socialist transformation. Well, Khomeini had some different ideas, of course, and saw it coming. And this is what forced Ali and so many others into exile, and crushing the revolution in the consequence. Why am I mentioning that? Is because the lessons of that carry right into the present moment today. We've seen the legacy of what happened in the Nicaraguan Revolution, which started with great promise, but was subjected to terrible, of course, a contra-war, largely instigated by US imperialism, but also suffered by the Sandinista movement becoming progressively less democratic as the years went on, to the point where today, of course, we have Daniel Ortega, the leader of that '79 revolution, in power in Nicaragua, presiding over a regime that's probably even more repressive than the regime he overthrew 40 years ago. And of course, you had the Grenadian Revolution, which overthrew, of course, the government, but was consumed from within by a fight between more democratic socialist and Marxist-Leninist elements, the Marxist-Leninist elements killing the leader of that revolution, Maurice Bishop, which is what opened the door to a subsequent US invasion. So here's the point that rings to me about Ali, is 1979 was the last time we saw actual revolutions occur in which Marxist tendencies were predominant. Revolutionary Marxist tendencies were predominant. They weren't as predominant perhaps in Iran as they were in Nicaragua and Grenada, but they were very predominant. This was no mere small marginal force within the Iranian movement that brought down the Shah. So what I think Ali, with his constant discussions of the lessons of Iran for today, was telling us is avoid those two tendencies that is the tragedy of the Iranian Revolution. Avoid this tendency to think that, oh, we have to go through this long stage of bourgeois democracy without it being under the control of the working class, as if that is going to get you to your goal. It's not. It's counterproductive and even suicidal. No less counterproductive and suicidal, though, is the notion that there is no difference between liberal or bourgeois democracy and authoritarianism. We can just ignore the difference between the two, as if socialism and democracy can in some way be posed as inseparable. So I just want to end with this. You know, in my experience in the movement, we've seen a lot of people come and a lot of people go. A lot of people drop out because they're disappointed by the failures or the setbacks. And surely one of the greatest tragedies in the history of thought is when a good person spits on their own past in order to revile everything that made them worthy of our acquaintance in the first place. Ali was the opposite of that. He went through these tragedies and difficulties, but he didn't spit on his past. He tried to teach us what we can learn from the future from the past, and carrying that forward in our hearts and in our minds will allow us to rejuvenate Marxism in a revolutionary humanist direction for the 21st century.
Thank you, Peter. Sorry, I kicked out by internet. Next speaker is gonna be Mansour. Fortunately, came back. And then we add Robin from Raya Dunayevskaya. Mansour, please pick up this speaker.
Hi, rest of the people attending the memorial for this wonderful guy that first time I met. Just give you an, a kind of, it goes back to 1984 when I up on the USC campus, and wife, which they have met in organizations, Zari, or they were selling the translation of the 1844 Marxist manuscript on humanism, and that was the very first place that I did see him, because we were a small group of Marxists in issuing a little kind of leaflet, a Marxist leaflet. We were also rereading Marx. But anyway, essentially my getting to know him goes back to 1984 and that encounter, and later we became friends. And when I moved to LA, we kept in touch. We went through so many different, readings, going to demonstrations. There was a Friday night meeting. I remember it was a church in downtown LA. It was a kind of hotbed of a lot of different kind of political discussion. So Ali was essentially really he really is a part of my political life for sure, and even to some degree my personal life, and it's a really totally quite a loss. He's also a very, very bubbly guy, as Ali Reza would know. He was fun to be around, and loud and funny, and met many times. But quite a constant thinker in terms of trying to figure out the experience of as Peter said, trying to give the lesson of the Iranian Revolution to the progressive and the revolutionary community. And he was active to his very last day, really. I think I met with him about 2 weeks before he passed away. And we had lunch with Mehdi. It's another one of our comrades, which is very active. So we really lost a really, really good guy for our movement. But I think he has made his contribution by what he has written, by the lives that he has affected. We won't really know that till this goddamn monstrous regime in Iran it's going to be overturned, and people like him are going to be celebrated as people that they resisted, they contributed to the forward progress of the Iranian Revolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mansour. Your voice was not clear in the first part, but fortunately it's resolved. Our next speaker is Robin Markarian. He is a member of Raya Dunayevskaya. And Robin, please pick up the mic.
Hello, you're hearing me, Ali Reza? You have
Yes,
my
Rob.
voice?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Ali Reza, for your moving speech. And really, comrades have said everything about Ali Kiani, an unforgettable comrade, and one that we have had a very good connection and cooperation. Here I want also to remember someone who was related to Ali. I mean Dariush Kayatpur. He was a young activist. When first time I met him during my second detention in Shah regime in 1972, when I was interrogation period in a common committee that the Shah had organized for cooperating all security organs, the SAVAK, Internal Ministry, and the others. That was a really torture, heavy torture center. I was in a solitary cell, and one day they brought Dariush to my cell, and I found him intelligent, resistant, and a resolute comrade. Then after that, we were together about 5-6 years until the revolution in central prison of Tehran. Although we have had the different ideological concepts and also strategic concepts that divided us with each other, but he was really a very resolute and intelligent activist. Then after revolution, he joined to Razmandegan, and after the split in Razmandegan, he was the leader of the revolutionary wing of Razmandegan, who against the right wing that wanted to support Islamic Republic. They were very resolute to overthrow the Islamic Republic. He was also sometime in a free zone in Kurdistan. I have seen him. He returned back to Iran for organizing the underground organization of Razmandegan. He was arrested and massacred in massacre of Iranian political prisoners in 1988. My comrade Reza was with him in last days of his life. Remembering Dariush and Razmandegan revolutionary wing and revolutionary comrades is also very important for me as someone that I have had the experience of underground struggles under the Shah regime, and after that under the Islamic Republic. When you have a common organization and you are devoting your whole life for your cause, you feel a deep commitment toward your comrades. And always you feel that you have the responsibility to continue the mission that you have started together. And this feeling in some time is a problem. For example, for me, it was a very big problem during the evaluation of armed struggle. Who I was one of the initiators and participant of armed struggle in Fadai organization. When in prison, we have reached to, we evaluated the armed struggle, and we have reached to the point that it was not a right tactic in struggling Shah regime. We have had the crisis with us. So for this changing the direction, this Richtungswechsel, changing the direction that is very necessary for revolutionaries. I think the Iranian left carries two defeats: the Iranian Revolution defeat, failure, and also the crisis of the world communist movement, the fall, and the both of them is a very big challenge, and that needs evaluation, revaluation, and changing the many strategies and everything. And very short, back to Marx and Marxian socialism. I find Kambiz or Ali one of the resolute comrades who have seriously tried to understand what was wrong by our tactic and strategies in our struggle against Shah regime, and also what was wrong that resulted in the fall of the 20th century socialism. So there is very big challenge now in front of us. You know, in Iran now we are experiencing a revolutionary situation, huge surge in working class struggle. For example, yesterday there was a nationwide strike by teachers of Iran in big and in small cities. And every day we have struggled. The Iranian working class is in the streets, and they struggle against this fascist regime. But we have something that the Iranian left is not yet ready to present an alternative, Marxian alternative for reshaping the socialist movement of Iran. There are the Stalinists who have tried to repair the Stalinism with new face, and the other lefts who have joined to liberal democracy, and they are now the part of liberal democracy without any futures, like the Tudeh and the majority of Fadayan. That they made, they have a contribution in tragic, the tragedy of Iranian revolution. When I want to say that there are the trends that are trying to vitalize and trying to reshape the Iranian socialist movement across the democratic socialism or Marxian socialism, but it is a very big challenge. And I am very happy that we have had the comrades like Ali Reza, and also we miss really Ali, that we have very, very common understanding, not only for what is the alternative, Marxian alternative against capitalism, and also the current developments of Iranian revolution. Also, we have had a very good connection and cooperation. Ali Reza and Ali have participated in our TV shows, which is being broadcasted in Middle East and over Iran. And we have had some message from Iran, for example, from northern provinces of Iran, who have said, who have watched Ali's shows, and who have written about Ali, and asked us that we present him in detail to them. So thank you very much, Ali Reza, for the time, and I hope our other friends, comrades, are also speak about Kambiz. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Very good discussion. The last tribute comes from, before we start to get a name from the participant. Last speaker is Chris. Chris has also video from Ali Kiani. Chris.
Ali Reza.
Sure.
I think some of our friends, you know them, and Nasrullah is here, okay. And also Masoud Peivandi, and Reza Reistana. I think they want also speak shortly.
Sure. Is it possible we put it after video? Because Chris is going to put video. Yes. After that, definitely. Sure. Thank you, Robin. Chris, pick up the mic, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, like a lot of my comrades speaking today, Ali, I only got to know him late in his life, but he touched me all the same. And I knew him for his philosophy and his theory, his humanity, his patience. But it was in 2021, we got lunch, and he started telling me about his experiences as a revolutionary, which I hadn't really heard from him before. As Rocio had said, he usually was pretty private about that. And so I started asking him more questions, and I realized how much of a life he had led. And I suggested to him that we could start doing some interviews, and he could talk to me about his experiences, his thoughts, and how he's developed as a person and as a revolutionary. So we started on that project in 2021. We have about 9 hours of interviews about all of these things I've heard from him that have been shared today too. And he had the intention of getting a book about his life together. Now, we didn't really get to finish that because he ended up passing before we could really work on a book or even finish the interviews, but I still intend to do something with it. But what I wanted to share today was just some a shortened version of one of those interviews where he talked about working with the worker councils in Iran and during the revolution, and his thoughts towards the different conflicts in the left at the time, and then his evolution towards Marxist humanism. So I'm going to share my screen and play that. Oops. Sorry, I realized the sound's not there. Let me fix that. Okay.
This war happens, which caused the crisis of the left from within, because
hold on. Can you hear the sound? Okay, thank you.
This war happens, which caused the crisis of the left from within, because in each left organization, some of them part of the organization based on their anti-imperialist ideologies. So they kind of supported Khomeini in order to fight the war. And this conflict collapsed ideologically most of the left organizations, you know? So I wrote a very long letter and criticized this article and exposed them for what it is, that is trying to use this concept of anti-imperialism, you know, to kind of take us to defend Khomeini, you know. And my reasoning was that anti-imperialist cannot be, if you're anti-imperialist, you have to be anti-capitalism too. And you can't crack down and stop people's struggle for freedom. And whoever crackdowns on the workers and kills them and tortures them and put them in jail, or they do it to the left, they can be anti-imperialist, because if you were anti-imperialist, you had to be anti-capitalism. And if you're anti-capitalism, you have to be in the side of the people and the workers and the struggle, the defending the struggle for freedom, not, you know, taking it from them and crack down on them and, you know, stop that. The organizations of Iranian left, one after another one, from within start, you know, to collapse, because they didn't see this crisis as an ideological crisis. First, they were treating him as an organizational problem. And at the same time, after that, the crisis got so deep that rank and file people start rejecting the centralized democracy, of the concept of centralism democracy that, you know, based on the Vanguard Party was main thing. They start rejecting it even without knowing that this concept is false, and it could give a chance to leadership, if it's corrupted or is right, become right, you know, right wing, or become like kind of a authoritarian, to use that the power of the centralism to convince the people of the organization to follow them in their pathway, which was anti-revolutionary, anti-Marxism. So this rejection became one of the things that brought down the organizations. And even our group, which was a small part of the group, and we were dealing with workers, rise against these pathways. And this has to do with our experience working with the workers, because the old version of the working with the workers was that you influence the working people, working class, and try to recruit them to the organization. So you would separate the active workers or smart workers or activists, and as soon as they become political activists, you would bring him, become a member of the organization and follow the organization's path, okay? This was an old traditional way of working with the workers. We had different path. Our path, our group, was that we thought instead of bringing these workers and become a member of the Vanguard Party, we should help them to organize the working class. So what we did at the place that I was in touch with 2 or 3 workers within the factory and others, what we brought the 3 or 4 top activists, workers activists. We made a committee that we would, well, I was in charge of that. So I was reading them in that group, study. We had a study group reading Marx, Lenin, Engels, philosophy, politics, economic, anti-capitalist economy, capital, things like that. And the workers, and we had a guy in the Islamic Council that would bring all the information that the factory owners tried to organize against the workers. So we had all the tricks and we knew everything. And the workers would bring all the problems that they had in the factory, like wages and how they treat them, not as a human being, and how they treat them, force them to work, extra hours, and all the problems that workers has from their point of view. And we would discuss this too within this committee. And then workers would go and write article about it. They would get a theoretical view of left and then analyze what is happening in the factory and write down what the workers' needs and reason for struggling and fighting and becoming activists, political activists, and criticizing the government and their workers' ownership and the capitalist system. After this, publishing this paper, like one-page paper, it got so popular within the factory that they would even send it to other factories. And we had a lot of workers that came from oil industry, and when they, workers were coming in because of the war in our city, which was Shiraz, and leave the border, those refineries, because it was right on the border between in the war zone. So a lot of these workers came from their city to our city, and we had a natural connection between workers, and they would pass this leaflet to other ones. And this page was one-page leaflet became so popular that the workers in other factories would pass it on and give it to their families, and and it became a very famous and effective thing to organize people and give it an idea. Until that in the same factory that we were involved, there was a bunch of workers, they want to get involved in this literature and organize and pass it around. And so what we did, because of the security, I used to tell these guys, all these top leadership workers, that to find out who is potentially like to get involved and is smart and become an activist. And then he would give me their phone number, and I would call them at home, and I say, we have these literatures inside the factory on that room behind the electric board, and you can go and grab it and pass it on. Without even he knows that who I am, and he would go and find it and start passing it. So this way, all the workers would get involved, and they couldn't arrest everybody if they would catch him passing the leaflet. They would put it in the top manager's desk, he will come in the morning, open the desk, and you see this leaflet. They will go to some other places in like a press section and see this leaflet was like on the wall and people are reading it, and in other sections in maintenance they would go and see it. I mean, it was all over the place, and they couldn't find out who these guys are and how they get these papers inside the factory, and all the information that he was in. And it was sharp criticism, and it was very popular because it was dealing with the everyday life of the workers. We didn't have this concept of the Raya Dunayevskaya that you have to become a philosophy of freedom in that respect, or concept of people as a reason become a reason. But we were talking about all the content of that categorical formulation that Raya kind of like articulates. We were talking about it in a very concrete sense of the everyday life of the workers in that respect. That workers has to be in charge, not the organization, you know. Workers had to decide and be in charge and think. And this was one of the most important aspects, that this paper was showing workers how to think different, how to think political, how to think for their self-development as a human being. That workers are a human being, and a human being has to be in relation to lower the workers, togetherness. And the concept was very understandable, but without even categorically we had formulate these categories like a theoretical matter. It was the content that it was like. That's why when I came to the United States and found out about Marxist humanism, it was, oh my God, this is what we're talking about, you know? We already had discussed these in the Workers' Council, you know, the underground workers organization in that respect, but we never theorized it like as a formula, as a categorical thing that, you know, you could write it in a book, or, you know, be theoretical as Marx's concept of humanism. You know, we were talking about humanism, talking about the Marxists, but never put them together. Marxist humanism.
Okay.
Done, Chris?
Yeah, all done.
Okay, now I don't know if you want to take a break or not, a few minutes, but if you don't, we are gonna take a name from the participant. I know few members of the Raya, they want to talk. I already knew their name, Nasrullah. Second one, I think, is Masood, and also Reza, if I remember. But if anybody else want to talk, if it's possible, put your name on the stack. And before I start, do you want few minutes break, or we gonna go ahead and continue? If you want a break, few minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, raise your hand so I can see you. Okay, it looks like everybody wants to continue. I don't see hands raised. Okay, our next speaker is Nasrullah. I'm not gonna stop anybody unless it goes too far, too long. Probably we're gonna have 3 to 5 minutes. Everybody can talk, and if you continue, I'm not gonna stop you. Just you need to control it yourself among the discussion timing. Nasrullah, you're next. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Ali Reza, for giving me the chance to have a few words since we have lost our comrade, Ali Kiani. Actually, many people spoke before me, and I think they have said almost everything that one can talk about this great comrade that we have lost him, unfortunately. I started to know Ali since I started to interview him for Raya Dunayevskaya TV, which is broadcast directly over Iran through satellite, and also our website and YouTube. Ali was a very interesting person. To me, he was a symbol of struggle and resistance against dictatorship and political injustice, economic injustice, and social injustice. Maybe I can say that Ali Kiani was the product of, or maybe I should say he inherited over 70 years of history of struggle against dictatorship and imperialism in Iran and the world. I say this because he lived in a particular and special time in the history of struggle of Iranian. He not only experienced the Great Revolution of 1979, he also raised, and his character, intellectual and political thought took shape during 60s and 70s, even before 79 revolution, at the time that in Middle East Arab situation, or it's better to say Palestine question, was a very important issue, and most of the Iranian youngsters and activists were under influence of what's happening over there. They could see directly how American imperialism is sabotaging everything against the Palestinian, and also they were trying to learn from their struggle. They were doing armed struggle, so many of them were trying to get into that part of the world to take exercise and experience of how to carry on with armed struggle. So Ali, in my view, was the product of several years of harsh struggle against inequality, and especially the harsh dictatorship, because many friends and comrades present in this session, I'm sure they have some sort of understanding from the dictatorship in the West or Western sphere. But believe you me that things in the East are different, are harsher, the standards are different. And Ali grew up during such a time. And he tried to understand and develop his character, his part of organization, how to organize, how to do clandestine struggle, and so on. I think most of the people who spoke about Ali said so many things that I don't want to repeat them. His hands-on experience wasn't only a practical fight moving from one trench to another trench. He also raised his understanding of Marxism. He had a very thorough and resolute stance for Leninism. He turned to review whatever he understood from the very first days of his lessons from Marxism, Leninism, and so on, and came up to believe that democratic socialism is the way. And also he was a humanistic Marxist. Anytime that I was talking to him or I was trying to invite him or giving him a ring that whether you can talk about this particular Iranian issue or international issue, he was very, very welcoming. And he wanted to talk as much as he wanted, although we were limited on the time of broadcasting. But he was always welcoming. He never had any limitation in talking to us like other Iranian. Maybe I have to say that I see Ali, one of the outstanding examples of his generation. He was really a true Marxist, a true fighter. And I very much miss him, like many other comrades. And I'm sure that we never forget him. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nasrullah. I have a list. I little bit revised it because Andrew was on list, Andros, and I didn't see it. Sean was on the list. So I put the list as first Andros, then Masood, then Sean, then Reza, and after that Umid. So far what I have. Anybody else think I missed them? Please put your name instead. Okay, Andrews.
Hello.
Mike.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. When the Iranian Revolution broke out in 1979, I was 24 years old. I was a college student. And I, shortly after that, met exiles from Iran. And I will confess to the brothers here, you'll forgive me, but my first information about the Iranian Revolution were from exiles from the People's Fedayeen guerrillas. And so as a young Westerner, a young Chicano student, this was my introduction to what the events that were happening there. I learned about the Savak, I learned about the Tudeh party, I learned about what the Islamic regime ended up doing. In a way, those brothers that I met were very similar to the Chilean brothers that I had met who had been cast out by Pinochet from Chile. It was I guess I could say that those exiles, and not just from that party, but from a wide sector, were the ones who sort of opened up my eyes to what was happening. As a USers are very stupid, as you know, about events outside of this country. I just wanted to say that it's to my everlasting regret that I will not have the opportunity to get to know Ali further. I understand that third world revolutions, uprisings that take place in the societies in which this government has meddled and intervened and subverted and done its evil deeds, those revolutions are very different from what we experience in this society. I have only undying admiration for you, revolutionary brothers. If you are here, if you made it to this meeting, that means that you're tough bastards, that you're diehard fighters. And I have nothing but admiration for that, and respect and love. And as I did for that man, as I said, I'll repeat, I am very sorry that I did not get to know him in a more deeper way. I do remember something that Kevin pointed out. I ran into him and Kevin and him at a I think it was a 2016 Bernie event in LA. It could have been the second one. And I know that he was a constant, he was a diehard, he never quit. I love to hear him talk because he was jovial, he was earnest, he was nothing but, a salt of the earth man. And that resonates for me. I know I'm repeating myself. I know that if you guys, I'm of your age, I'm 66 years old. If if you're here, it's because you're made of steel, as was he. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share my thoughts.
Thank you. Next speaker, if I remember, Masood. Is Masood available? Masood? I will go for Sean then. If Masood was available, just put his name on the Slack. Sean, that's your turn.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all the inputs. Everyone has a different view of another person, and but when I listened to everyone who spoke, really Ali was what everyone explained them, and I don't need to add to it. The only thing that I find Ali very different was that he was the only revolutionaries that I can talk to him. I talked to him extensively every week last year. We had a philosophical Hegel reading discussion for every week. And what was unique about Ali was that you could really talk about what is the subject of the revolution, the nature of revolutionaries in Iran, and the philosophical understanding that we have of them versus what is prevalent in the Iranian society. And but Ali was adamant about the right of the workers. He fought every day for their freedom. He was very current in his state of affairs of Iran. And he would never take any categories, philosophical categories, or formulation for granted. He would discuss, and everybody in this group knows that his discussion was very deep. He had good understanding of Hegel and Marx and Lenin, and he would go not arguing with people, but talking to people, accepting their ideas, and listening to their ideas, and also expressing his own ideas. And his ideas was very humanistic. He was a good human being. And it's definitely a loss to this struggle. But, but as was mentioned, I learned a lot from Ali. And for his persistence and for his sincerity in his discussion and his availability to give time to people to express themselves and bring every issue to a philosophical issue. Not that philosophical issue is higher than what the average person thinks. The average person and the philosophers, they think the same level, except philosophers puts it in more extensive ideas or apparatus or dimensions. But what the average man thinks on the street is what the philosopher is also thinking. I miss Ali. He was my comrade. I know him for a long time. I miss him a lot.
Thank you, Sean. I don't know, is Reza available?
Reza, I am available to Masood.
Oh, Masood. Okay, Masood, go ahead.
Okay.
After that is Omid. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, my name is Masood Peywandi. I am the member of the revolutionary organization, the Workers' Revolutionary Organization, Raya Dunayevskaya. So to be honest, I didn't know Comrade Kambiz before. Then in about the last couple years, with the Ali Hamid Wahed, they introduced us the Ali, and then we invited him for our meetings. And so that is the only way I became familiar with the Kambiz. And above your organization, Marxism, humanism, about 7-8 years ago, we created the Left Alliance, and in North America. And that time, some valuable our members, like late Dr. Ali Atash, Ali Reza Fariboz, I became familiar with your ideas, and Ali Reza passed me many books about Ryan, Peter, Kevin. Then, so in our organization, like my friend, like Robert Maikarian, he told me we have to be close with them because our idea is very close, especially the way we are looking for the democratic socialism and the democracy. So unfortunately, it was short time, right? So I could be familiar with the Ali Kiani or Kambiz. So, and as I said, it was short time, but about the last 7-8 years before, mostly I became very familiar with the organization idea. And as I said, we find we have so common thing in about our platform. So I want to make short because so many of the other friends, they talked enough about the Ali. I have nothing to say too much because as I said, I didn't know him for the long time. And Aliza, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Okay. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Masood. Masood is a really important member of Kargil. I don't know, he doesn't want to say, but he's one of the Fadais which he did during the revolution, attacked to army place, trying to get all the material, guns, and put it in people's hands. So Masood doesn't want to say, but he was involved with revolution in the peak of its times. Okay, next one. If Reza is not available, I don't know. If it's not Reza is not available, well, I would like to Omid. I would like to ask Omid to pick up the microphone.
Is Reza here?
Yes, we hear you.
Oh, well, I want to thank everybody, and it's always difficult to come into these memorials because it's refresh and brings all the good memory that we have from our comrades. And I knew Ali from Anjuman Azadi time, and then through News and Leather, and then obviously IMHO. I think everybody has commented about their memories and of Ali, and I have a number of my own memories with him through the organization and various activity over the years. One thing that it stands out with Ali was his humanity and the fact that he wasn't shy about, when we talked about the failure of Iranian revolution and what happened, and acknowledging that what we didn't know. So at the same time that he was curious to find out and learning new things, I think we agreed that we have a lot of unlearning to do. So it was difficult to, especially at the time period when the journal was coming out, and we were thinking, what the hell did we know about Hegel? What did we know about how to go back to Marxism? But we had to start someplace. And Ali was correctly believed that we need to, one, critique the past and understanding what the Marxism was a stand for. And I think his break, as so many other, may perhaps comrade also mentioned, that what has changed or made him to rethink his path for fighting was a focus and going back to Lenin's philosophical notebook. And what did that actually meant, not just for Ali, but for a lot of us, perhaps a lot of our comrades here that maybe they are much more familiar with that philosophical notebook. So it was critical to go back, and we always talked about how do we bring in that failure of Iranian revolution, the lack of connecting that philosophy that Raya so brilliantly had published and talked and left, that we couldn't really separate that philosophy from Marxism, and not really understanding the philosophy and not connecting and not uncouple it from the rest of the struggle. So Ali, the starting point, the fact that also others have mentioned, why was it important to see that failure and looking for a new solution, a new theory to answer today's struggle, was because he had a personal experience. It's difficult when you have somebody who goes through what he did over the last 40 years. It makes you to really thinking that how would that be different if we had to talk differently about the Stalinism, about the democratic socialism, the fact, how did we stand by at Banisat's time and nobody took a position? There were so many issues that we were not able to project and had a right perspective. So I think I personally, I don't want to talk about other people, but personally I have learned a lot from Ali and through discussions of what do we had to start and where do we need to start, so it was very important. I mean, the fact that in the past, even within some of the comrades that they've been into a number of different organizations, the fact that they talked about democracy, but the sectarian and undemocratic relationship within the organization had destroyed so many organizations within Iran and then outside of as well as other organizations too. So we came to understanding that you cannot just talk about democracy outside and not to practice it internally and not to practice it within the relationship with other comrades too. So it became important that looking at the concept of democracy, not organizationally, not only ideologically, but also in a very basic, very human level. So it's not just a slogan, it's just that idea of, in a human level, the idea that it was so appealing to a lot of us that Marxism, humanism brought that the very being, the very fundamental relationship that people need to have. And how do you bring that? How do you integrate that with your thoughts? How do you integrate that with your struggle? Yes, I miss Ali. He wasn't only a comrade, he was a dear friend. And through many nights, we talked about some of the experience and propaganda at the Shah's time, what we had to do and what difficulty that we had to even print a simple thing. We talked about some of our experiences in workers in the oil field and whatnot. So yeah, yes, it breaks my heart to realizing that we lost a great comrade, but at the same time, I think he brought, and I like to think that some of the things that he wanted and he started, and that we need to, we have started to learn that we continue that legacy. And so, yeah, I miss him, but most importantly, I think he brought he raised a lot of questions, especially for Iran revolution. And so I think I had a lot to learn from him. And I think we started last year having a number of discussion, and unfortunately we were not able to finish that as Ali Reza and some of the other comrades that they were involved in that project. So yes, it's important to going back. I think what his legacy or what he wants us to do, or at least what for some of the organization was, one, going back to Marxism, going back to understanding the democratic socialism, and going back to understanding humanism of Marx. And we always talked about that, another thing that what we, the failure and not having alternative or a solution to what we are facing today. That I don't think that it was only a, we didn't have an answer for a day after revolution. I think we all struggled because we didn't want a Shah, but I don't think that we had a clear understanding what we wanted to replace it. We knew that what we didn't want, but we didn't know that what we wanted. So, so having that vision, having that alternative, having that imagination, what's beyond the capitalism, made it more critical. And I think some of our comrades here are trying to untangle that and trying to give a meaning that we need to start having that kind of imagination. And yes, there is definitely a alternative, but not even thinking about, not even imagining, not even thinking that there are so many possibilities. I think we're going to be here in 20 years, if you are lucky, and going back to the same subject. So, so going back to the Marx, the fact that today's the democracy has been under attack in a global scale everywhere, it makes it more critical to going back to finding what is that democracy really means, and why we have to try to hold on to what we got and expand beyond that. So Ali is gone, and but his idea and what he wanted to do, I think a lot of us, we share. And my condolences to Ali's family and everybody. And at the end, want to thank you everybody here, and don't underestimate the people we have in this Zoom today, and taking care of each other, and because we need every single one and more of all of us. And so it's critical to be able to listen and be disagreed and continue the dialogue. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, I do not have anybody on list. I don't see anybody in stack. Anybody want to talk? Just want to know if anybody want to add some points. That's the time. Also, if there is any announcement, you're welcome to the announcement. If anybody has an announcement for future activities, for different things, please say so.
Ali Sagi, Reza called me and he said he has some problem with the Zoom, therefore he cannot participate.
Okay.
He cannot participate. Sorry about
Okay,
that.
thank you. That's okay. No. Reza, we know he's always active. He's always help.
Okay,
Understand.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Anybody else?
Ali Reza, short.
Masood? I'm sorry, who?
Me, Robin.
Okay, Robin, sure, go ahead.
Yes, I want to have a short speech in Farsi and maybe Armenian, because there are some Armenians also in the room. خب رفقایی که اومدن شرکت کردن، خیلی من تشکر میکنم ازشون. من دیدم رفقا مجتبی، فیروزه و رفقای دیگه هستن. ما اطلاعیه رو خب پخش کرده بودیم در جاهای مختلف، در سایت های مختلف پخش شده بود. خیلی تشکر میکنیم و خوشحالیم که رفقا در این مراسم شرکت کردن. Enger Geburg Asaturian, شادباریسه که اسمش هیشاتاکی آمار انگر علی کیانی حسومنگور که از آپاگام اسپستغرون دستنگ. Thank you very much.
Comrade Robin, you know Azerbaijani language. That's better. You can talk a little bit about that. You are from Tabriz.
Yes.
Thank you. Robin, thank some of the comrades which
in short,
also.
I thanked many comrades. We have announced this meeting in our website and other Iranian websites. Now they have come, they are present in this room. I have thanked them in Farsi also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Robin. Okay, anybody else? Any announcement?
Yes, Ali, just quickly an announcement.
Sure, go ahead, go ahead.
The Marxist Humanists based in Chicago will be holding a series of 6 open discussions starting a week from tomorrow, February 28th, under the title, Taking Stock of the Present Moment, Where Do We Go From Here? The first session of this series will be Why Today's Attack on Democracy Matters, very relevant to today's discussion. So if anybody is not on our mailing list and wants to know about future events that are coming up, not only from the Chicago group, but also from our European West Coast group and others, part of the Marxist Humanist, International Marxist Humanist Organization that holds regular Zoom discussions, you're welcome to join us. If you're not on our mailing list now, you can just send us your information, your email address, and we would love to have you participate in the future with our ongoing events. So we're going to be meeting every 3 weeks out of Chicago, starting on February 28th, and we'll be glad to send you the announcement of those open discussions.
Thank you, Peter. That's what I thought we should discuss. Okay, if there is not anything else, I should thank you and thank everyone, friend, comrade, and the family of Ali Kiani, because family participated. They didn't want to talk, but you know, they give us a lot of information in the site for me, just writing something. Their family gave me some information which I knew what's going on. And also Raya Kargar, thank you Raya Kargar to co-sponsor this meeting and help us. Really, you should thank all the participants. Without you, we really unable to do such a memorial. And if there is not anything else, I should say good afternoon, some of you good evening or good night. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Right.